second term, you would assume that people will experience that amount of.
Yes. We're going to go ahead and get started. Wherever's right there. Yes, call for help early, man.
John?
Okay, we're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. So, John, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Stand up, Evan.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. We're going to call this meeting to order with all board members present either in person or on the phone. The first item that we're going to take up is actually A03, which is our annual our annual financial statement from Mr. McAllister, who's in the audience. Thank you. Our audit report.
Well, good afternoon, evening. Madam Chair and members of the board, it's always an honor to be here, and especially on a nice rainy night in San Diego. Thank you for that opportunity. But I did want to tell you that we are pleased to be able to present to you the findings of our Audit and Finance Committee this year. The Audit and Finance Committee was asked to review the external audit report conducted by our auditors, Nigro and White, for the 2008-09 fiscal year. The committee commends the district finance staff for receiving an unqualified opinion, again, from the external auditors, which is the best opinion a school district can receive. As well as completing the audit on time and meeting state deadlines for the 5th year in a row. Each year, the audit process has become easier and clearer. And I think those of us on the committee would agree that it also is easier because the auditors we work with are very helpful in at least bringing to us things when they see them, right when they see them, and identifying problems or issues that they think might need extra attention. So it's a very positive thing that I think we have going with the auditors that are currently employed by the district. Between January and December of 2009 this year, the committee was provided with periodic progress reports on the external and internal audits, status reports on the National Science Foundation, the Supplemental Early Retirement Plan, and the Internal Audit Hotline were also provided to our committee. Audit findings and recommendations from the previous year were tracked, and implementation reports provided to the committee. And of the 6 findings from 2007-2008, 4 have been fully addressed and solutions implemented, and the remaining 2 items, ASB funds and purchase orders, were carried over to the 2008-09 audit report for their comment. The external audit report for 2008-09 discussed 9 findings. The audit findings outlined certain internal control issues, material weaknesses, and in one instance, federal noncompliance, finding 2009-9, which relates to personal time accounting for federal programs. This is something that we do have concerns about, but we are confident that staff is addressing in a very, very fast, timely way.
Okay.
The committee continues to be concerned, though, about accountability of district management staff in addressing certain audit findings related to personnel time accounting, which is different than some of the records that were found to not be in place. And we have seen the finding numerous times previously, and although the committee commends the payroll department for addressing these overpayments by implementing a compliance program to help prevent this from occurring, our internal audit reports show that we are still routinely not following this process, and it needs to be fixed and addressed. On Tuesday, November 17, 2009, our committee unanimously agreed to recommend that your board accept and approve the independent auditor's report for 2008-2009 and concurs with the recommendations contained in the audit findings. Also with me here today are representatives from your auditors, Nigro and White, and we would collectively be available to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions from the board members?
No, I move approval.
Okay, we have a motion for acceptance and a second. If there's no more questions or comments, then I would ask that board members that are present press their buttons. And Mr. Evans, on the speaker, would you give us your response, please?
Yes, I heard Mr. McDonald's report, and I know there's a meeting on the audit finance committee, and I vote yes.
Okay, and we can show the rest of the votes at this particular time. That passes unanimously 5-0. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure and our pleasure.
We appreciate all the work that you do, Dan. Thank you so much. Next, we will have our fiscal year 2009-10 first interim financial report in compliance with Ed Code Section 42130. Mr. Koba.
Thank you, President Jackson. This is the first interim financial report. Mr. Macias will update us. We are accounting for the period 1 July to 31 October. This is a report that is required to be submitted no later than the 15th of the month of December. James, over to you.
Great. Good evening, board members. Just James Macias. Feels a lot like Colorado night, where I used to live about 16 months ago. I have some staff members here that are going to help us kind of walk through the first interim report, which will include Amy Shackelford, also Jody Macalos, and Debbie Foster. So they will join me when we talk about revenue and expenses. The first thing I do is just want to remind everyone that there is some specific actions that the County Office of Education requires us to do, and also the California Department of Education. And that's laid out there essentially on the first slide that talks about the board must approve the first interim report. You have three choices. You can approve it via positive certification that we're able to meet our obligations, qualified certification, you may not be able to meet the financial obligations, and the negative certification, which we'll be able to meet its financial obligations. Once again, the staff recommends that we have a positive certification because based on the financial numbers, even though they're extremely tight, we think that at this point in time, based on it being on the first interim, so the first pass for this fiscal year, that you should recommend as positive. Other things to keep in mind is that the county office will review these financial information and they'll give us feedback to us. And part of what they'll tell us is, do we agree with your assumptions? Do we think you're going to make the numbers and those kinds of things? Also, what will be included in the packet to the County Office of Education is essentially a list of the identified reductions that you folks have made as a board and approved previously, based on the fact that this is the first interim. In talking with Superintendent Koba and board members, and the fact that we've had other budget meetings and nothing has changed since the June 23rd adoption, then part of our implementation of reductions included what was approved back on the June 23rd, 2009 budget adoption process. So again, I do recommend positive certification. I wanted to remind us about a calendar that we have to be held to. And so just to harken back to September 29th, we did a budget update during a regular board meeting, walking you through the unaudited actuals and where we saw the financials being forecasted at that time. We also have done a budget workshop on October 20th. If my memory is right, I had submitted a memo to the Board of Education on approximately October 2nd that identified the actions that had been taken from June 23rd up until that date. We've also had the budget workshop on the 17th, so we've had a lot of budget activity taking place that we've been reporting to you on what I call a very frequent basis. As a reminder, if the interim report is approved, we'll submit that to the County Office of Education a little bit before December 15th, which is required to submit by the 15th. Some other numbers, dates to keep in mind are essentially the 10th. It's projected that the governor will have his new budget posted for everybody to look at and review, and the Assembly to look at on the 10th. At that point in time, normally what happens is the School Service of California will essentially meet with a lot of CFOs and CBOs throughout the state of California and talk about what the budget implications have transpired from the governor's budget. Also, as a reminder, March 15th, we are required again to include a second interim report, which will include essentially activity from July 1st of this past year to essentially December 31st. So we'll get another update to the board, to the County Office of Education, and to you folks during that time as well. In the packet of slides that I have here, we do include a lot of detailed assumptions. And I just wanted to point out that from this perspective, in talking with Superintendent Koba, one of the things we decided not to do as a team was not to include the hiring or spending freeze savings that we're projecting. If you remember back on the previous budget workshop, we had identified at least $20 million of savings. And the reason we hadn't done that for this first interim is that we hadn't had time to essentially take the action, meet with all the school principals, and meet with all cabinet staff to say, where are we going to reduce out of your budgets? So we didn't have time to do that. And mainly because it was such a tight turnaround, I didn't think it was going to create too much burdensome for the principals, because they just didn't have time to get everything done between now and today's date. The other thing that we didn't include is the brace savings, because we all know that one of the ideas that came about from some of the work that Bill had Phil Stover do was some additional ideas or thoughts that you could think through. So I want to make sure that you understand that we did not include the brace savings that had been identified. I'm going to take you through high level really quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jody and Amy, and we'll all talk together a little bit about this. If you look at this first schedule, it's a high level schedule. It's a total general fund. And if you take your eyes to column 2, that's 2009-10. That was the budget. So those were the numbers we reported to you back on June 23rd that we adopted as a budget. So 2009-10 is that budget. Column 3, that column essentially shows everything up until October 31st and our projections. So that's what the column 3 represents. Now, column 4 represents all of our items that we included, plus the cuts that we had incorporated and you folks had approved, at least on the preliminary basis, during the budget adoption time frame. And then column 5 is the out-year projection of 2011-2012. So if you go down the list here, the first thing that I look at a high level is I kind of check my ending balance, right? So that is column 2, row 5, and we projected an ending balance of about $102 million. Now in the projection slide, if it's column 3, that's moved down to $72 million. There's some puts and takes why that happens, so we'll actually walk you through that, why that's taken place. But the bottom line number for me that I'm managing by is, of course, expenditures. How do we keep the expenditures in line? And the goal here in this column for 2009-10, by making $20 million of savings, at a minimum, you'll see the $72 million increase by about the $20 million. So like I said before, that number of $20 million is not reflected in the financials at this point in time. We've got to operationalize that, and that's what we'll do beginning in January when we come back from the winter break. The other thing that's going to be important for us to realize is that not only do you look at the financial statements, but the County Office of Education does, as well as California Department of Education, but there's a lot of other entities that look at our financials, and one of those entities will be our credit rating agencies. So it's incredibly important that we present to them factual information, which last year's financial results did get approved by the Audit and Finance Committee and by the external auditor. But the item that's a little bit troublesome for me, if you look at column 5, row 13, that's $237,000 there. So what's happening in our financial projections is we're showing that when we get to the end of 2011-12, you've got $237,000 general fund unrestricted. We're still able to cover our economic uncertainties. That's the $22,500,000. We're still able to cover the restricted grant carryover. We've got to do the accounting stores. We've got to do the prepaid expenses and the revolving cash. So from a state of California Department of Education perspective, we're still able to cover those things that they say you have to have in reserve. That totals $26 million. When you do the difference, we end up with a $237,000 number. That's due to a number of reasons. And before we get into the details of everything, one of the reasons that's due to is that when we did our June 23rd budget adoption, in working with everyone we worked with, the County Office of Education, etc., and the fact that we got stabilization dollars in, At that point in time, we projected that we would make our CERT payment, our early retirement payment, which is $14 million. We projected that we could use stabilization dollars for that. Well, further research with the California Department of Finance and also the Office of Inspector General, which is the federal side, they recommended that we don't do that without prior permission. So I've been working with OIG to get prior permission, and so far I haven't done that. They haven't responded back to me. So in order to make sure I met their requirements at the federal level, what we ended up doing is we took the stabilization dollars from covering the CERT payment, and we moved it over into covering salaries, teacher salaries, essentially. And that's pretty much what the stimulus dollars were designed to do, to make sure people didn't, to limit the number of people that might have to be laid off. And so we actually did that as well. The other thing that you see now that we didn't have included in the June budget adoption, it was because it was an accounting perspective, because we had revenue that we weren't able to recognize, and 116 teachers. So the 116 teachers that you folks approved back in June, anywhere between $8 and $10 million. In 2009-10, you approved to use stimulus dollars for Title I. What you haven't done is you haven't approved to use the remaining balance of Title I stimulus dollars in 2010-11. So since you hadn't taken a board action, what I couldn't do is show that those salaries would be taken by the stimulus dollars for Title I in the second year. So what we did is I had to make sure those salaries were covered by general fund unrestricted. Because based on the research that I had done and talking with Bill and Brenda Campbell, the program manager for federal programs, the only approval point you folks had done on the Title I dollars was essentially only use it for this year for those teachers.
I think that needs to be researched, because I think the board's under the impression that was for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, but then we'll check on that. I did actually check. We did actually go to the board information, and based on everything we had seen, and everyone told me it was only for 1 year. That said, though...
We did, excuse me, President Jackson, we did verify that the documentation says 1 year. So you need to make an official documented decision for the second year. That's per the official record. I asked Cheryl to research that. I just wanted to make sure for all of us.
Right. And if that is the action that you folks take, you may want to make that action tonight. And then what we can't do, I don't know. I probably can't put it into the first interim now, but for sure we'll be able to move that into the second interim financial results right away. What that'll do for us is that's going to help that $237,000 number a bit.
Can I go ahead and move that item right now? That we approve that the use of the stimulus Title I funds for that purpose for the 10-11 year as well as the 9-10.
Yeah, what you did is you approved it for 2009-10.
I'm making a motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second.
It's been moved and second that we use the Title I funds, stimulus funds, again in the 10 and 11 years. We did the 9
This is from the original allocation.
Yes.
That was
Exactly.
a 2-year potential.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Basically, we're saying the action was to extend it to the second year.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Dr. Evans, any comments?
No, it's just my understanding that was what we intended to do. We weren't going to go part way on it. So I'm for it.
Okay, board members here.
I have a question. Were these the funds that were supposed to be used for innovation?
Partly. Yeah, partly they were supposed to be used for innovation.
Mike,
Stimulating,
Kathy,
Yeah.
your mic.
concepts and ideas.
Right. The other thing that we did with the other portion of those dollars is that when Dr. Greer was still here, you approved essentially funding the cost associated with 40 teachers.
I didn't approve that, but the board approved it. Yes.
Okay, I apologize. The board approved using dollars associated with 40 teachers to provide access to them to get into the special education program and receive a master's degree.
Right.
So part of the innovation process when Dr. Greer and Dr. Morris were here was some of the innovation was there was a gap that they felt was needed in special education teachers. So the board approved to take some of those dollars and use it for that. Also, Dr. Campbell has a very outlined plan on Title I spending, including stabilization dollars as well, the stimulus dollars. So she's got a mapped out plan for that also.
Okay, well, I didn't approve of it then, and I don't think I'll be approving of it now. I don't think that's the intent of the funds. So
I just want to be clear. I respect Ms. Nakamura's opinion on this, but we're talking about the Title I money
Title I stimulus.
This Title I stimulus. I believe that pot of money was the special ed stimulus, not
No,
the Title I
it wasn't.
stimulus.
No money was designated specifically, except by us for special education. There was money. Half of the pot
Okay.
was designated for innovation, and in my opinion, we didn't use that funding for innovative. We used it to correct structural deficiencies within our budget by saving teacher jobs, which is a philosophical debate on this. But I just don't think that it's sound business practice, nor is it sound educational practice.
I just want to. I'm sorry. I just want to clarify that this was the $15 million Title I stimulus money per year. And out of that pot, I think the cost was about $9 million to lower class size in the 25 schools.
Right.
That's
the part
specific.
I didn't agree with.
Okay.
That's what they're talking about.
This is what we're discussing now. So there's a motion and a second to do that for the 10-11 school year as well. There is roll it over, yes. Okay, Dr. Evans, will you please vote verbally, please?
Yes, I vote yes.
Okay, please show the board members' votes. So that passes 4-1. It's not going to. Okay, please. So that action is taken for you, there, Mr. Macias.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to slide 6 on the PowerPoint presentation. And the first thing that we have there is we kind of broke it up in revenue and expenses. So I just wanted to quickly remind everyone that due to what the state did for us in the late June of last fiscal year, if you remember, they gave us about $24 million. It was too late in the year to pull the funding back. So they gave us $24 million of additional revenue. But then in the fiscal year for 9-10, this current fiscal year that we're in, then they ended up taking the 24 back plus. So they reduced us back by...
Is there any way that we can, because I don't...
An echo, because
Dr. Evans, are you listening to the webcast?
you can just turn the sound down there.
Could you turn the sound off the webcast? We
Yeah,
can't.
just turn the sound off because
I'm listening to Mr. Macias twice, and it's just distracting.
between the two.
So did you turn the volume down, John? Webcast on his computer that he's listening to.
Okay.
So if you could turn down the volume at your place until I need to speak.
Turn off his mic.
Oh, okay.
I'll turn the volume down.
You can turn off his mic too, Cheryl, maybe.
Well, it's not the mic, because it's
Okay.
since I'm sitting right next to it, I hear it more clearly, and it's as much as I'm enjoying Mr. Macias' presentation, I don't want to listen to it twice. So.
Thank you, Mrs. Knox.
Okay, please continue.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. So I'm going to just point out a couple of highlights here for us, and then if we have specific questions, I can bring Jody up to answer some of those. So, like I said, what the state did for us in reducing us out by $28.2 million is they gave us the one-time cut, and it was a one-time reduction to ADA revenue. So if you hearken back to some of the presentations that we've given you, that's what's gotten us down to about that 4,000 plus number from an ADA perspective. So gave us 24 at the end of the year, and they actually took it back and plus some, and that's a reduction of $28.2 million. We've incorporated that into our financial schedules. The other thing that we did with the County Office of Education, I want to make sure you understand that maybe unlike previous years, I can't speak to it, but we work a lot with now the Department of Finance, and we work a lot with the County Office of Education. And we do that for a number of reasons. And one is because they have more information than I might, or more up-to-date information, especially the Department of Finance. The other thing that we do is when we work with the county, part of what our liaison relationship there is to make sure we're doing the things that they expect us to do. And so one of the things that they expected us to do is not to show the ADA reduction in let me just grab it real quick, in the 10-11 and the 11-12 fiscal year. Okay? Because the information that we know today is that the governor and the legislature have told us it's a one-time ADA reduction. That's the $28 million. So what we didn't do, and we had guidance from the County Office of Education and Department of Finance, was not to incorporate that reduction of ADA revenue in 10-11 and 11-12. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't come back to us at the beginning of the new calendar year and say, for next fiscal year, we're going to keep the one-time revenue limit reduction, and we're going to make it next year and the year after. But as a point of reference for you, and when people look at the financial information we've enclosed, we did not include the 8A reduction for 10-11, nor did we include it for 11-12. That can also be found in the School Services dartboard in the County Office of Education. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Let me see what else I might have here. I'm going to bring up, is it Jody or Amy want to talk about the adjustment to IMFERP from FCMAT? Come on up, Amy. The other thing that we did is, and I'll let Amy talk to it, is if you remember back when the FCMAT team was here, one of the things that they told us that when we recognized a certain amount for our IMFERP instructional materials, it was on the restricted side, not on the unrestricted side. So I'm going to let the two of them kind of just talk you through that just a little bit more so you understand the reduction, the transaction, and then also hit the reversal of the $5.6 million, okay? Go ahead. This is Jody Mackles, if you don't know her.
Hi. What we did was the instructional materials was budgeted under the restricted resource, and per FCMAT, they recommended that we move it to unrestricted. So that's what we did for this year for first interim, was we rebudgeted the money, and it's now considered unrestricted funds.
That was due to the flexibility.
Due to the flex, yes, it was a flexibility transfer. In addition to that, we also received an additional funding of $5.6 million, which is also sitting now in unrestricted, and there was an ending balance of $1.2 million that also was moved to the unrestricted funds from the restricted side.
So that's helping our ending balance.
It is helping our ending balance.
It's helping our ending balance for this fiscal year.
It was moved from the unrestricted to the restricted.
Moved from restricted to
unrestricted as part of the Tier 3 categorical flexibility. That was one of the resources that was originally restricted. The state changed it to unrestricted, so when we built the adopted budget, we had not moved those dollars.
On the revenue side?
Yes.
Oh, gotcha. Yes.
And so it's a net zero impact to the total general fund. It was a finding in the FCMAT report, so we just wanted to point out that we did make that adjustment. And that's the same case with the redeveloper fees. We also made that adjustment, the $5.6 million that we had originally swept those interest balances from the different redevelopment agencies and moved them into the general fund. We reversed that entry after getting a legal ruling and talking to the county office, which was contrary to what FCMAT had recommended to us during the summer. So we did adjust that as well.
And those are normal adjustments that we would make in the first interim report. What will happen after we submit this report, like I said, it'll go to the county office and they're going to come back and say, where are these items? Why did you adjust it this way? How did you do that? Because they're going to reconfirm our financial numbers at the county level.
Yeah. The county office had asked us to submit Fund 21 and 25 in addition to the general fund, just so that they could verify that we did make those adjustments to all of the funds, not just making the adjusting entry to the general fund.
Excuse me. If you want most of the transactions have taken place on the expense side. So maybe why don't you stay up here? Debbie, I'll let you join us. And so if you look at slide 8, right, this is what I was talking about earlier. What we did on this is, like I said, I conferred with Department of Finance and the Office of the Inspector General. They said, really don't recommend you using stabilization dollars to cover your early retirement payments. So we got a payment of about $14.2 million. So what we had to do is we had to transition budget revenue from one side to the other. And so you'll see a shift there, and it's really that transaction where we had the SERP savings being booked to stabilization dollars. And what we had to do now is we just had to transfer salaries from instead of SERP. So we just moved it. And based on what the OIG had told me, they're more comfortable with that. And what I couldn't have done is I couldn't have incorporated this into my financials without prior approval. So they didn't give me prior approval, so that's really why I had to make the adjustment. If you go back a few years when you did one of the most recent early retirement packages, there was a finding by the federal government that the district hadn't sought out approval prior to making that transaction. So when working with them, we didn't want to make that same mistake a second time. So that's why you see that move there. Go ahead, Amy. I'm going to let you come on up. And Debbie Foster is coming up as well, so we can kind of walk through some of the high-level changes that have happened on the expense side. Go ahead.
So you can see for the classified salaries, there's very little change that occurred with those expenses. We did, when we built the projections, we took the current employee actuals, and based on our current vacancy rate on the classified side, the 3.85%, we used that to project our salaries for the end of the year. So right now, our projections are below budget for classified. For employee benefits, we haven't changed those assumptions on first interim. What we do typically is wait till second interim, because right now we just finished open enrollment, and so once HR is finished processing, then we'll have a better estimate of how many employees changed from Kaiser to Pacific Care back and forth, and so we'll make those adjustments in our second interim. Which button do I?
This one.
Services and other operating expenditures. We did get another recommendation from FICMAT regarding our routine restricted maintenance, and what we've done in the first interim is to be more conservative about how many dollars we actually do transfer over to capital funds based on what the definition of what would be considered major maintenance versus routine, so fixing a roof versus fixing a leak. And so it's about $4 million less than what the budget is, and that's we did include that in the projections. Capital outlay, we just had a couple of changes. We did receive a private donation for La Jolla for, I believe it's their field?
Turfing field.
The turf, yes. And so we've included that in the projection along with some additional ARA funding. There's about a $3 million software purchase that they've got in their spend plan.
That was different from budget adoption.
That was different from budget, yes. The spend plan for the special ed ARA funds were not in the budget adoption. So a lot of these changes that you're seeing between the expense lines are a result of staff coming forward with the spend plans for those dollars, and so we're making those adjustments. And there'll be more adjustments at second interim because there's still some more pockets of dollars that haven't been approved yet. This one. Mm-hmm. The next couple of slides are just the assumptions that we used. Typically what happens when we build the first interim, we've got restricted resources and unrestricted resources. On the restricted side, the budget analysts work with the program managers to go through their projections to get the most accurate forecast, and then they make those inputs into the projection ledger. On the unrestricted side, we have to use a set of assumptions, and that's basically a result of trend analysis. And also, we use the dashboard from the School Services of California. And so some of these assumptions are a blend of the two. The COLA, the deficit, some of those are based on information from the state. We did have a decline in ADA. How we forecast our ADA is we take a 3-year rolling average of our P1, and so we did update our revenue assumptions because our ADA did decline this year. And then we also do true-ups with our revenue with the state, with federal, and with other private funding agencies. So as we get better assumptions and entitlement and grant award letters, we will update the revenues, and then the budget analysts and the revenue accountants will sit together, and then they'll reconcile to make sure that the budgeted expenditures do not exceed our revenues.
Excuse me for a second. Debbie, do you mind just talking to them about the $1.7 million that we had for Title I, just so they kind of understand how budget adoption was one way and how it changed?
Okay. Yes, and about 2 weeks ago, we received notice from the state that we would actually be receiving in this current calendar fiscal year $1.7 million to our Title I. Additional from what our budget plan was. So we'll work with Dr. Campbell on implementing that additional funding. On the same token, we received last week the notice that we would be receiving less EIA funding. So it's a balancing game, 2 separate programs, 2 separate intents, working with the program managers to make those appropriate adjustments.
And you'll normally see those transactions, members of the board, in our monthly reports that we send to you, the ASB reports. So you'll normally see those transactions in that documentation. Let's just check here. Let me see what else we have that's important. So those are all our assumptions, and you can look at those at your leisure when you like to. And if you have other ideas or you have read somewhere you think it should be different, I'm glad to take those comments and figure out how we might integrate that into the next Go ahead.
Yeah, we just had a slight change on the utilities. We did have an increase on our electric bills based on some of the new technologies that we've been implementing along with the Prop S, like the air conditioning in the schools and the I-21 technologies. That was partially offset. We do have some savings on basically garbage removal.
Yeah.
So we did normalize our projections on the utilities this year based on the current forecast, and then we had about a 15% built in for the following 2 years.
So what we did is we sat down with Daryl, and we also sat down with the utilities team, Drew Rowlands manages, and we said, you're adding more items kind of to the grid. So let's do some better estimating on what we think that's going to cost us. So that's why you saw a little bit of an uptick on the utility side because of that. And that was essentially what we're going to send to the to the County Office of Education will be the list of items that you had approved essentially back on June 23rd. They've also asked us to include other items that are being considered. So with board approval, I can include the items that were listed on the brace, even though we know those are areas that have not been approved. But what they're looking for, similar to the last time we've done this, is if you remember back, we said here are items that essentially we can do. Here are items that are subject to negotiation or notification, and then here are other items that we could do. So what my plan is to essentially provide them a complete packet of information. Because when I've talked to the County Office of Education, they've said, even though we know some items you still have to work through negotiations, as long as you have a plan and a backup plan, we'll be willing to take that information. Now, what they're going to want us to do for the second interim is they're going to want us to be a lot more precise in what's going to really happen for 10, 11, 11, 12. So what we'll do is we'll put together an entire packet for them to say, here's what's been approved, and here are other strategies that will include items that can be negotiated. So in talking with the County Office of Education, they'd say they would be willing to take that entire packet.
Okay, Dr. Evans. Superintendent Coburn and Dr. Evans, if you have any questions.
Thank you, President Jackson. I just wanted to add the strategy that James has just described about the strategies is what we are seeing all the other districts doing in a very similar way across the county. I mean, James and I are reading the Chief Business Officer, the Chief Financial Officer, or talking to Laura Duzick. Another point to be made, even though it was said very early in this conversation, we think there's a positive impact to the hiring and spending freeze. But this is for a financial performance period ending 31 October. So those positive impacts will be specifically detailed in the second interim. And on the Wednesday evening budget workshop, we'll actually show you some projections that look notable, look positive for those freezes.
Okay. Mr. Cope, as a point of reference, we will include the action that the board took on the 3% and the 2.5%. I will include my projections for that to the county office in this first interim, just as another component of the packet.
Dr. Evans, any questions, comments? Can you hear me?
Well, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I'm not sure whether it's going to make a comment nowadays, but I'll just put it now. I mean, I appreciate what the staff has to do in terms of the first interim report and the second interim report. They've done a really good job on it. I just want to remind that we, as the board, operate on somewhat of a different schedule. Because basically, this goes up to the end of October, and I've already talked to the superintendent and the theater and so forth about that we're going to need as soon as possible is that updated information that Mr. Colbert is referring to about what's happened in November and even December. So that my hope is that when we start looking at governor's figures, we're really clear on what our balance is at the end.
Yeah, Dr. Evans, our plan is to, working with Cheryl, is to essentially either incorporate that into one of the normal budget meetings that we'll have, so you can actually see year-to-date actuals via using the Fiscal Insight tool. So I think we're ready to do that. What we were trying to do is make sure we completed the first interim report first.
Mr. DeBeck, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, I know this is a lot of hard work, and and it's a lot of it's a little bit of a guessing game. But I have some concerns. when we look at this report, it is a multi-year projection.
Yes, sir.
And when I have gone out to the forums and when I've listened, I don't see how this projection, for example, an ending balance for 2010-11 of $55 million holds up compared to the statements we're making to the public about the deficits we're facing. And even the second level at the 2011 and 12, the picture is worse. So we're showing that an ending balance decline that's not even a fraction of the items that we're talking to them about the cuts we need. So it looks to me like we've got two kinds of financial arguments going on. One is we're reassuring the county that we're able to handle our affairs, and the other is we're telling the public we can't unless we do some major cuts. I have a real time with that. I really have a time with trying to tell my community that I need to have some support for cuts that are essential when the kind of report I file with the county is contrary to that.
Thank you.
Let me finish because I'm sure there's more to it, and I may be oversimplifying, but the issue is if you're not saying the same thing to the people that you're doing business with, if you have one report that looks contrary to what you're saying to your public, there's something that doesn't make them trust you. Okay, I'll leave that be. Now, it seems strange, and I understand that you're looking further out, but for example, the projection that you have here for 29 and 10 is a $72 million ending balance for 9-10. Is that true?
So I'm going to get the schedule here. You're looking at column 3, row 5.
I'm looking at column. I happen to have different documents all the time, but I happen to have A2 exhibit that went to the board, which is multi-year projections, 9-10 budget, 9-10 projection, 2010 projection, 11-12 projection. So the second column is the projection column that I'm talking about, and it says in it that the first one said the budget, 9-10 budget has $102 million ending balance, and the second one says no, maybe that's a little wrong, but we project it to be now a $72 million ending balance. I can't see that could be true. Under the things we're telling the public, I don't see how we could project an ending balance of $72 million, unless we could show that, but that ending balance is not real because we don't have any encumbrances. Okay? But people look at the numbers. They don't look at what the end balance includes. They look at the ending balance as being the money in the bank at the end. It's not true. You could say ending balance less estimated encumbrances, and you might be talking about something. And I'll bet you that the ending balance and the ending encumbrances end up with a number that's a lot lower than $72 million.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind, Mr. DeBeck, is that like I said before, one of the things they did to our revenue limit, if you look at column 2 versus column 3 on row 2, is they cut us by at least $28 million for the one-time reduction. So that one-time reduction of $28 million is going to essentially make your ending balance less because they took almost $30 million of revenue away. So that's just one major item of why that ending balance number would come down.
Yeah, well, I'm not convinced that. I'm pretty sure you've answered most of the kind of considerations you need to understand a 9-10 budget. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that I could say, honestly, that I believe that we are going to be solvent or that we're going to be anywhere near certain about the numbers surrounding the 2010, 11, and 2011, 12 projections. And, the certification we have to give is that we believe these figures for the 3 years. Not that we believe them for today, but we believe them to be accurate for 3 years, and I just don't believe that. And I don't see, and I looked in the documents that I was provided, not the ones maybe that are going to the county. There may be some other stuff that I haven't seen that they're going to get.
You've got the entire package.
But in this document, this one here is the one I think you're filing. I went through it as far as I could go, and I went through all the assumptions, sections, and all the other places, and I couldn't find real evidence of the pay cuts or the furloughs or any of the potential solutions for our budgets that we are considering. And so then if that's the case, how could then, if they aren't here, how could they then be part of their consideration when we're saying, oh yeah, we're going to do these things, trust us? I don't know. I can't. Maybe I just couldn't read the document.
Sure. As I've always said, I'm more than happy to sit and walk through the financial plan with anybody and everybody. So I'll be happy to, if you want to do a special workshop on just walking you through the entire SACS report, we can go ahead and do that. I'd be happy to do it.
Well, where in this document are the potential reductions for the 2 years that we're facing? Just where? Give me. I got the pages. They're the same pages in the Form 211 is the one I'm talking about. So then you just tell me where the cuts are, the potential cuts are that will balance our budget in the coming 2 years.
Projections.
Or where are the assumptions that say we're going to do the things that will take to balance the budgets in the coming 2 years? And I could not find them. And it's different than walking us through it after the fact. After I vote, I'm supposed to understand what I voted for before I vote. And so, I have to take the documents I get on their face. And if I get the documents and I have questions about them, I can't vote a positive certification unless I feel comfortable that the documents support a positive certification.
There's the multi-year projection form, and that shows you the 3 years. Shows you the current projected year total, the 10-11 projection, and the 11-12 projection.
But what does it show the cuts that we are, the assumptions would be what cuts we're doing.
So, for instance, you could see if you looked under B, expenditures.
What page? They're all numbered. 9. Yeah. There are 26 pages. Give me a number.
Unfortunately, the SACS software that the state provides us doesn't. It's right before the last section where you see 1 to 26. It's
right.
And up in the upper right.
Okay, I'm through it at the end of 26. Then we go to another set of pages, right?
Yeah.
So then,
before that section of 26, you'll see it's a one-page form. It says Form MYP. In the upper right-hand corner, it's
at the beginning.
It's about in the middle of the package.
Okay. Well, here's 26 to 26. So, and I've gone through. Now we got some other pages, and they're different numbers. There's pages 1 of something. I don't know. Page 4. Okay. Well, okay. I'm just not convinced. So I know how to vote.
Okay. Well,
page. If you start at the beginning page, go to page 25.
All right.
Because you'll see, like under certificated salaries, for instance, under base salaries, we've gone in 2010-11, 547.
Everybody else is looking at it. I don't see they've seen them, but if you can take me through the sections, I don't care.
Start at the first page.
Yeah, Form MYP in the upper right-hand corner. There's a multi-year projection, unrestricted, restricted total.
Start here.
And you'll see where our certificated salaries, for instance, we decrease them by $41 million.
This is 910 multi-year projections. Okay, and then you're saying.
So then there's a projected year total. There's 2010-11 projection and 2011-12 projection columns.
Okay, so now let's see certificated salaries, and you show base salaries for.
So $547 million in 10-11, and then in 11-12 it decreases to $507 million. Classified salaries, you can see the adjustment from 196 to 188 million.
So 350. Okay, so you're saying that you're talking about expenditures.
Yes.
Section B.
Yes.
Total certificated salaries, and then you have a number 351 for the first one, and then you say at minus 9% salaries.
You'll see 547 million in 2010-11, and then 11-12 507 million.
If you look at column C, row 1, right?
Yes. Yes.
And how is that supported by actions on the board? Or is it just your estimates of what might happen?
Those are the calculations, and also when you go through the criterion and standards, you'll see the FTE counts. We've had to, whenever we've met or not met, basically whenever we've not met a 5% variance, we have to explain it in the criterion and standards. And so that's the final section of this package. It's the 26 pages 1 through 26, and you'll also see how we've projected.
I guess I'll let the county decide.
Okay.
It's a point of clarification.
I'm not satisfied, but let them figure it
What's
out.
not in the package, but it is in your presentation, is the last page, page 14. Is that spreadsheet a part of the supporting documents that's going to the county?
Yeah, that's part of the packet that will go to the county, that document.
But I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Until today.
Apparently.
Mrs. Nakamura.
We're providing that packet in each presentation we've given you. So that's not a new document.
The list hasn't changed.
Mrs. Nakamura, please.
John, are you finished?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. I want to take, I wrote down Mr. DeBeck's quote, "I'm supposed to understand what I vote for before I vote." And I'd like to take a different tact on that. What this is going to mean for the public, and we just got this PowerPoint presentation, ahead of time. I mean, just 5 minutes before the board. We got this SAC report, which, you had trouble explaining. This is a perennial problem, and you had, trouble explaining how to find a particular page, which the pagination on this is part of the, the ongoing problem with the state's software. But nonetheless, we're supposed to know, again, I'm supposed to know what I understand what I voted for before I vote. The hiring and spending freeze savings incorporated in the second interim report, I know that they're not included in the first interim assumptions, and yet it is something of a leap of faith because you say it's going to be in the second interim, which would make us feel more comfortable about this $237,000. But I don't know what they are. They have not been identified. I really don't know. Do I agree with them? Are they sustainable? I know some of them are positions that would just happen to be empty, and nobody or a particular principal didn't have time to fill it, even though they really wanted to fill it. They didn't get the position in there. So I don't know what those are, and I don't know if they're going to actually be realized. The brace savings, I don't know what they are yet either, and I understand, again, those have not been included in the first interim assumptions, but for October 31st, but I still have questions. There's $237,000, which, we spend that in a sneeze in this place. I mean, 237, it's gone in, moments. Because our budget is so large, and I always think of us in terms of someone that's trying to refinance their house or take out an extra loan on their home, because we have to do that all the time with regard to trans notes at the end of the year when the legislature does not pass their budget. We have to get bridge financing for stopgap, and so that affects our credit rating, our bond rating on Proposition S. What is submitting a $237,000?
The taking out a trans note itself doesn't affect our credit rating. It's essentially, do we have the ability to pay back the debt that we might be taking? So it's not.
Does our credit rating, does the bond rating, or that does affect our credit rating on trans notes and the quality of what the amount of money, just as though, right now if I want a 5% interest rate on my house, it depends on what my credit rating is. They might give me a 6% because I didn't pay my auto bill on time, right?
Correct.
So it's the same sort of thing. Is this going to have some effect on our credit rating?
It very well could.
Yeah, okay, so
that's the other thing, Mrs. Nakamura, that's important to talk about here is that not only will the County Office of Education look at our financials, just like I said earlier, but I'm sure once I submit this at the county, I'll get a call from Standard & Poor's and also from Moody's to walk them through our financial plan. The interesting thing about it is that they keep confirming my financial numbers, even though we keep saying the financial numbers aren't confirmed. As Dan McAllister just a second ago essentially approved our external audit. And approving the external audit means that he's confirmed the financial numbers for the financial plan.
I share Mr. DeBeck's. I really don't. There is a lot in this that I don't know what I've approved. I don't know what we're giving up. We are cutting so close to the bone on so many of this, much of this, and I know that if I don't understand it, that the public certainly doesn't understand what a lot of these terms mean. For example, the IMFRP, which is, I think, that's the instructional materials. Instruction. I do know what it means, but no one else does. That's out there watching. But what is this going to mean? We're studying so close to the bone. What else are we giving up on this? And then you flip through the SERP. That is what it is. And some of your major revenue assumptions, that there's not going to be any projected change in our ADA when we've been having declining enrollment. There's no projected change in that. When did we not talk to a demographer? I have concerns about that.
Yes, we have talked to the demographer.
What?
We have talked to Roy. Yeah,
okay.
What we do is, Amy explained a second ago, we actually look at a 3-year average to find out where we're trending, and based on that information, that's what we use to project our revenue limits.
Okay. Well, it's not in line with what I've understood. So I don't know. I don't find. I share Mr. DeBeck's concerns about what this means, and then these reductions that were board approved on June 23rd. We have not gone to any of our unions for reductions in salaries or health care or positions, and these on the back, I don't really even know what they mean. First grade, 80 FTE, so we're going to eliminate 80 first grade teachers. What's that going to do to class size? What's it going to do to class size in the second grade? What's it going to do to class size in the third grade? Previously we, were at least bold enough to identify what that was going to mean in class size, and I believe these proceedings are all about transparency and letting the public know what that means. The elimination of vice principals, elimination of librarians, elimination of library tech, health techs. Down in the second column, reduce central office staff by 100 FTE. That would be, full-time equivalent positions. I find myself going back to school and asking, who, what, when, where, how, and why. I don't know who those 100 will be. I don't know how, what their functions are going to be. I know that we've already cut there deeply. How are we going to do that? I just don't have confidence. For a different reason perhaps than Mr. DeBeck, although I share his concerns. I'm supposed to understand what I voted for before I vote. I don't understand from this what it's going to mean for the day in and day out lives of our teachers, and what it means in the day out, day in and day out education of our children. I really don't, and I concern about the sacrifices that we're making, and people's ability to do their jobs and function appropriately. So.
I share those same concerns.
Yeah, I know you do. And and I also agree, particularly with Mr. DeBeck's comments, that we are saying one thing out to the public. We've had all of these budget, and this doesn't seem to reflect it, even though I know it's October 31st, but we still have data. So, I understand that, but I'm not comfortable with it.
Yeah,
so
one of the dilemmas that we have is that from, as I explained during our most recent workshop, some of the rules that we have to abide by from the county office and California Department of Education, they're very rigid in some of the things that they do. And so in talking with the county, they don't want us to make assumptions that have not been approved or factualized. So when you look at the information...
What do you mean by approved? Approved by us?
State.
The state.
By the state, okay.
Yeah. And so when you look at the budget workshop information that we've been presenting, that's a high-level projection of when we adopted the budget, how badly has the economy performed in the state of California, and how much has the revenue versus expenses gap increased. So that's the $21 billion revenue expense gap. So we've got $21 billion of more expenses than we have revenue. And so part of the problem is that I can't officially recognize that to say, I think our portion of that is going to be $125 million in the financial projections. I can go ahead and show it as kind of a representation purposes, for display purposes, say, worst case scenario, this could be what happens if the revenue versus expense gap continues as it's been continuing since June 23rd.
And that's what we'll do for second interim.
But I don't even agree with, I don't agree with what we have here, and I don't believe that it's transparent enough for me to make a decision. Are these prudent decisions on behalf of the education of our children? I don't know what some of these assumptions really mean, and I don't know that I've got confidence in them. What I do know is that we as a board have failed to make decisions that school districts all around us have made over a period of time. Some of them made them last year, some of them made them the year before that, some of them made them the year before that even. And for the last 3 years we have stalwartly not, and have in fact, gone back on some decisions that we've made. And I think it's long term, what it does is it digs us deeper and deeper and deeper into this hole, and in the long run, or actually it'll certainly be in the short run, it's going to hurt more people than making those initial earlier decisions might have. And I still see this as a stopgap that really doesn't answer those questions and doesn't take responsibility or doesn't change anything to ensure the education of our kids. And that's just from my chair, the way I see it, and it is my concern that we have death by 1,000 cuts, 1,000 little cuts that are undermining education every day, and yet I don't believe that the public is aware of them really for what that means in the day-to-day education of our kids, and I don't think we really understand what that means in the day-to-day education of our children either. So anyway, thank you for being generous with the time.
Thank you, Ms.
Jackson. Yes. First of all, thank you for the work that you have put into this. It's been a lot of work and explanations. I think that certainly the report is due, and it has to be done by a certain criteria, and I think we meet that criteria, and so therefore I think the report needs to be moved on. I need a motion for that. Secondly, though, our budget hearings and what we say to the public is what we are preparing for our budget for next year, which is due the 30th of June. I think it is wise for us to look at all of our options between now and have those discussions with the public. That is nothing taken away from this interim report. It is just a different thing that we're doing at the same time. I don't necessarily believe in following the crowd. My parents used to say, it's my job off a bridge where you do the same thing, and the question is no. I think we have been looking at things differently. I think we should continue to look at things differently, and I think for the purpose of tonight's meeting, the focus is on the interim report, and Mr. Barrera, we haven't heard from you, but would like to hear from you, and then I need a motion for us to move this forward, or whatever the board decides to do with it.
Yeah, so first of all, I'll move approval of the recommendation for an unqualified, I'm sorry.
Oh, positive.
What's our term? A positive recommendation, yeah.
Okay. All right. And thank you. This motion and seconded. Any more discussion?
Just had a couple of questions. So on the multi-year projections, on the general fund unrestricted, so column 3, row 3. So we're projecting that in terms of our unrestricted expenses, that they're going to go up about $5 million at this point. $5 million of unrestricted expenses above the 2009-10 budget.
Are you looking at page 2 of 3?
Yes.
Mr. Barrera?
Yes.
So the 681, 172, 969?
Yeah.
Can we find it in there? Hang on a second.
We had to move teachers to unrestricted.
Yeah.
That's the total. I'm looking at the general fund unrestricted. I think it's the next page.
General fund.
Go one more page.
It's because we had to move the teachers, so this kind of goes back to how we originally had budgeted the SERP using the ARA dollars, and since we didn't receive approval in time, we moved we adjusted the 116 teachers and put the CERT payment to be paid for out of unrestricted, and then the 116 an equivalent of those $14 million of CERT payments on the restricted side. So
there's some benefits there that have to be paid for that aren't paid for on the CERP side.
So we had some puts and takes that kind of net why it's only a $5 million increase. We had some decreases in other expense categories, but the main driver was the swap between the teachers from the restricted to the unrestricted as a result of that CERT payment.
Technically, we have a lot of flexibility in how we use the stabilization dollar.
But it's still considered a restricted fund. I got you. Okay. And then in the assumptions, if you could go back to that slide. Yeah, and this is a little bit, I think, following what Mr. DeBeck and Ms. Nakamura said about different messages. So we're assuming a COLA increase for this year of 4.25%?
The state does, yes. It's part of the dashboard.
The revenue doesn't get reduced down?
Yeah, it's the 6... in one of the board workshops, we had presented a slide that originally the revenue limit started off at $6 million, and then by the end of the day, with all the adjustments, we're only getting about $4,000 something odd dollars.
Yeah.
The COLA is part of that what gets us to the $6 million, but since they're not funding our COLA, that's what gets us down to the $4,600 per ADA. So that's part of the reason why we're getting less revenues.
Okay, so this is, and I'm a little confused right now, and I guess this is the point. So I think the message that we've been conveying in our town hall meetings is that we're not getting a COLA for 9-10 year.
They're not funding the COLA. That's the COLA that they're projecting, but this year it's unfunded.
So we
How can you
Is this
put it
where
as an
they-
income
we didn't
assumption?
include the COLA.
I think what they do is they
Yeah.
project a COLA, and then they layer it with deficit factors.
That's correct.
Okay.
So that's...
That's so they back it out by applying the
And then you
deficit
back it
factor.
out.
That's partly why you
Okay.
see the deficit
All
of 18.355%.
Okay. All right, I'm fine.
You want to press your button, please, Mr. Barrera? And then verbally, Dr. Evans. Dr. Evans, any more comments? I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes, can I speak now?
Yes, you may.
Okay, it's just a little delay, so that's why I'm confused. I just wanted to say, I think, first of all, we really need to make the message clear to the public that we did make a lot of this last year. We do have a lot of decline sizes. We do have 1,000 fewer employees. So I think that's one point that needed to be made. I think the other point I'm praying for the first interim, second interim does not match up with what we necessarily need to do in terms of our decisions. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, based on October 31st, and so there's two things that are missing. One is all the things that have to do with the hiring and spending freeze and other actions that we've taken in terms of reducing the budget, having calculated yet. And then the other issue is whatever budget that the governor will submit on January 10th. So when we're talking about how it's October 31st date, we know that there are things coming from the governor, but that, as I understand it, is not supposed to be part of this report. Is that correct, Mr. Macias?
Yeah, I can only put in there what's a known assumption and what's been approved either by the governor or the state legislature. And then, like I said earlier, I have checked with the County Office of Education to check to make sure my assumptions are in standard and with an alignment with what most other districts are doing across the state.
Okay, so this is, I understand this is the requirement we need to meet at this point. I think a lot of issues that Mr. Beck and Ms. Nakamura are talking about are the ones that we're going to need to address almost immediately after we submit the interim report, which is to get the November figures, and then to get the December figures, and then to get the governor's figures, and then we will be looking at what actions we take and what sort of negotiations we have in place and so forth.
Mr. Evans, but we're still basing this report on assumptions, so it's not completely. So, we're not completely ignoring. It's a 3-year projection, and it's still based on certain assumptions that we are being given by the state. So we're not doing this blindfolded and just saying, that it's a particular point in time on October 31st. You do look at budget assumptions. And that's where our disagreement and even some of the deductions we've already agreed to. Okay.
Okay, please vote verbally, Dr. Evans.
I vote in favor of the approval for
Positives.
Okay. Okay. Please show the rest of the board members vote. So that passes 3-2. Thank you, Mr. Macias.
Thanks for your time tonight.
Our next meeting is scheduled for this coming Tuesday at 8:30. Okay.
Okay, and I won't be here.
You won't be here?
That's the day of my surgery.
Oh.
I just want to congratulate James Macias and the staff on the unqualified opinion on the audit, on the clean audit. Terrific work on this tonight. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Have a great. It is Friday evening, by the way, people, not Tuesday. I was thinking it was Tuesday still. Oh, Monday, yes. Okay.
In the morning, I'd be here.
I have mail.
Carry stuff out.
It was 8:30, right? Yeah.
I hurt my back yesterday.
And then 12 o'clock closed session.
Good night, Mom. Sorry.
No, and that's all right.
Bye.